lay the acrylic out as thin as possible, because I may not like it. If you lay out straight acrylic, as it dries, it dies. But if you have the medium in the paint, as it dries, it's more interesting, has more strength. We'll see that, hopefully. Painting you do, you start out with a light tone, and as you build, the pure color comes up towards the end, and you don't need as much, which means you're saving money. Now here's a yellow I picked up, regular yellow. So I squeeze my tube of yellow in there, and then a little gloss, a little water, and I got a good mix. See? Hopefully, one never knows, you know. Everything is a possibility of less.
That's what makes it fun.
Yes, yes indeed. Now, if I'm going to use any greens or anything, I always throw yellow in anyway because I like the green over it. Because as it dries, it will get a more beautiful tone, and it gives it more light. Okay, so I can run crop any area of this painting and develop an idea. So if I want to run, say, the concept of the blue that's in the bottle in the bucket, I could use that on a horizontal as well as a vertical. I can change its position to whatever I need to abstract, because you're abstracting. You're looking for action to abstract from, not to copy. Hopefully. So now I'll run a pure tone very quickly, so that this tone will automatically run. And you notice I've already picked those flowers because I like their color, so I laid it in. There's a little flowers laying on top of the dish, and that's the color I'm going after. Not so much the action of the flower, but the tone of it. And I'm putting it on pretty thin, so that as I move it, I can move the action that I'm after all over the painting. You can see how thin this is. It's almost like watercolor. Now watch. I can start planing in an action. Now a lot of abstract painters, this is about all they would do, and then that's the end of the painting. But it would make a very bad demonstration. You just get a lot of paper and put a different color on each one. Yeah. So now we're gonna have this as a base color, which we will cover in some places and bring up to the surface in others. You can see how thin it is. I keep it very, very thin at the very beginning. But I want the idea of that tone running horizontal and vertical through my piece so I can control it and make it shift and move. In other words, the difference between a painting and an illustration is the change of position of the color. So that you're interacting, you're not just putting color on top of a color, you're interacting with it. And that gives you much more strength as a painter. And that separates you from the herd, which is doing pretty bad work these days. You know? So I'll lay this in just a little bit. The beauty of abstraction is you're free, because it becomes more of a personal of action of color, position of the color, and the movement of the color as the whole begins to be built. So that gives you an edge. The image disappears. As the image disappears, the abstraction becomes more personal and stronger. But you have to make a choice. A lot of you guys want to hang on to the image. If you hang on to the image, paint the damn image. If you want to abstract, start removing it or changing its action so that you can become more personal with while you're looking at it. Okay. Now I'm going to throw in the change in color. The color we're going to change every once in a while and interact. And you can see I'm pretty clever. I run that color from the outside in. I don't run it just on top. And I change its position in relationship as I play with the whole surface. In other words, the whole surface isn't just one color going on top of another color. It's interacting with that color. So you have to know what those two colors are going to do. In other words, I don't want to run a green and a blue together because I get a muddy green. So I'll run a yellow and an orange, a pink and a red and an orange, or a red and another red. But I won't go red and blue because I get a brownish tone. So you kind of know when I make you guys work on the palette so you can see what the color's going to do. And then you make your choice. You may want it brown. You know? Who the hell am I to say? You know? So I'll run this behind over here, just in case as we go along, we have to have it. And keeping it thin like this, you notice you have more control. This is the same on a canvas. In fact, it's better on a canvas because you take a rag and rub it and knock it right into the cloth. Because acrylic and canvas aren't going to hurt each other. You can't do that with oil. You have to put an oil primer down and work on the oil primer. But in acrylic, it's plastic. I'm listening. Anybody got a question, just pop it up. Now you can see that these colors like each other because they just sit. They don't struggle, they don't fight. The light is still happening. The thinness of the paint is part of that.
Could you give me other examples of like the blue and green that don't work?
Well, the ultramarine blue is usually a blue that when everything is dry, you make glaze over certain areas. When you use ultramarine or cobalt blue, you mix another color and then another color. Two colors to that, you get a nice mix. But one color, not necessarily. Often, the trick to that is ultramarine blue and cobalt purple I mix together very often because it gives the blue and the purple more juice and makes the eye pop when it sees it.
I never heard of cobalt purple.
Oh yeah, cobalt. Yeah, cobalt violet they call it. Yeah, but they call it cobalt violet. It's two colors mixed together to make a violet, and they use a big machine to do it, so you don't have to.
So which blue would you use to make a nice green? A
Huh?
cerulean and yellow? Which
I would be cerulean and yellow, perfect. Makes beautiful greens. I also use yellow and viridian green, make greens. I use viridian green and a little umber to make a sap green. See, I don't buy a lot of greens because I can mix them out of that one hose, and then I have it. Hopefully. Okay, this is getting kind of silly, but we'll push it a little further. Green will happen eventually as we move along. Now, your best friend in acrylic painting is water. Very cheap, Now, a lot of people go and buy really good water, but I don't know why. And I'm doing this to show you how quick you can reach the white of your paper when you want it. So if I want to throw a color in there, let me see what I got here, if I have anything of interest. Here we go. What blue do I have? Aha. Just what we were talking about, cerulean blue. I always pre-mix it with the water and the medium because it just makes the color more interesting and easier to manipulate. Dun, 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 dun. Lo and behold. Now watch when this sucker hits up there.
What blue is that?
Cerulean. I'm not stupid. Okay, now I'll play with the idea of the stems to create an action and help me to develop a shift or more energy in the movement. If I'm lucky. If I'm not, then tough luck. Now, let me run that as a movement. Now you can see that if I'd have used ultramarine, this would have been gray right real quick. But the cerulean, it isn't that unhappy, so you gotta let the color lead you. I'll make it a little thicker here. If I can find it. Now I can paint through often a lot of this stuff pretty quick, as we'll see. Because I don't want that blue sitting on top all the time. First of all, it's annoying, and secondly, it doesn't work as well. Okay. Now I'm going to take my white, bless my soul. Doodly doodly dee. And a little bit of this stuff. There we go. Now when you're working in acrylic, you got to wash your brushes right away or throw them away.
That's a nice brush.
Yeah, either or. You either wash them right away or throw them away.
That's a nice brush.
Oh, it's a very good brush. But it's a mix. It's not a real sable. It's a synthetic and sable mixed. It's a good brush. Has a hardy career. You know. There we go. I'll control myself with this and start pushing the blue, which eventually is going to have yellow on it. As I run through the blue here, and you can see while I'm going, you eventually understand why I'm using the white first. Because the white's your neutral that any color will go on top of. Green, whatever. If you look at the colors in my painting will change as I want them to change, or they won't, because I don't want them to. That's the application of the right color on top of the right color under the color, and then paying attention to the drying time. For example, up here I'm throwing in white. I do the same thing in oil. I will run white patches through my painting, and then I will put, say, a green on top of an orange and have a nice bright green or a blue, depending on what I'm playing with, what kind of action am I developing. Then I put it away and I let it dry for a couple months and I pull it out. I'm in no hurry. Oil painters are not in a hurry. I was talking to James. We both were kind of chuckling because there were paintings that we pulled out. We started in 1976 and just finished them today. The canvas, the canvas will crack according to the drying time of your pigment. You have to pay attention to your slow dryers and your fast dryers. It says it right on the tube. Get some glasses and you'll see. If you work with a fast drying pigment or a thin pigment like I did here at the bottom, they dry very quickly. I don't care what their pigment is. As it comes up to the pure color, the drying time is more important because you got a heavy weight of that color and it will crack. I once pulled out a painting and the entire surface was cracked. So I sold it as a cracked painting. People still have it on their wall. They have cracks. So I don't worry too much. But I know that lead white is your fastest drying white. Your titanium is second. Your zinc is the slowest. I work with a I can't work with lead anymore because my wife has a heart attack. So I have to use titanium and zinc white and I mix it. About 1/3 to 2/3 titanium. And that's my palette white. I use that throughout the painting. And then when I change that white, I take it out of the group and I mix a little color in it to knock down the chroma of the white because I don't like a bright white all the time. So if I'm going to use a white and I want a different temperature to it, I change it. But you can play with it. You can do I've done all white paintings like Raymond, you know. Everybody thinks he invented it, but he didn't. Now what I'm doing is pushing the stems to a different place. So they're not all sitting in the same place. They're being pushed into the orange. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. If everything works out. One never knows. So now I'm going to push this color up and pull it to the foreground. When I push this from that, the whole thing becomes more energetic because the eye is picking up its action moving throughout the piece rather than just sitting behind. So every time I can change the position of a color, and you can notice this is stronger to the color that we're actually looking at over there. And I haven't used any really strong color yet. We may ruin this by doing that. But that's what demos are for. They're not for good paintings, they're just for information. You know? Who knows? But look at the difference in what's happening. Look at the difference in what's happening to the stems. They're starting to belong to the color that it's sitting in. It's becoming a part of it. And you're always pushing for that as you paint. And if I keep control of the strength of my color, I can control pretty much anything I do when I want to do it and how I want to do it. With any luck at all. Oh, I hate that. I hate those things. So let's do this. Now this is almost dry, by the way. I'm listening. Well, let me thin this out. I get a little goofy here. Okay. Now I'm going to get a little heavier with the yellow. Show you what happens. Take a look. Your eye will tell you what the painting is doing or not doing. Not what I say or what I think, but what the painting is doing. It tells you. With any luck at all on it. But if you just pay attention to the action of the color as I play with it and move it, you see by changing its position, its amount of relationship to the rest of the painting, it has a force. Now I'm going to kick up more orange in that tone, to kick up that orange as we come towards the end of the piece, if we're lucky. Oh, look at that, all that paint is gone. Shame, shame, shame. And I always pull things under and over all the time. I don't let everything sit in one position. If you let your color sit in one position, you have no tension. If you don't have any tension, the painting ceases to exist. It becomes a nice decoration, if you're lucky. And you sell it right away to another. I'm playing with the edge. It helps me to control the movement into the other color. So I mean, I'd hate to hurt this for you guys. You know, I like to have something halfway decent, so you say, well, maybe he knows what he's talking about. But the trick is to get your color to shift and move into different positions all the time. And if you do that, you have real control of your paint. You're not letting the paint control you. And you don't arbitrarily just throw a color up there because you feel like it. You do that on another, you keep another canvas around and do that. Because if you just throw a color up because you like it, you may destroy a beautiful piece of work. Which some of you think is fun, but destroys my eye. You know. So now I'm going to shoot in a lot of this in here, and it's never going to be absolutely. Okay, here we go. And this already has the mix in it, so I'm just mixing it in and enriching the color just a little bit. Hopefully. Now make it a little more dominant. It still has a relationship, so I don't have to pull it up all over the place, just in certain areas of the paintings as I'm working down. Now the yellow and this color should begin to start to feel comfortable with each other, hopefully. So I brought that orange back up. It's become the dominant just by simply lifting it. But since it's at the beginning of the painting, there's an interaction between the bottom, the middle tone, and the top. And I haven't gone into any extremes in color. When this dries a little bit, we'll coat it with a coat of green, see what happens. Probably turn into Gurgia. But who knows, you know. Now let me kick this up here. Always want to control one. And I'm using the stems to get a kind of rhythm in the piece that didn't exist before I laid them in there. Yeah, it's getting interesting. Okay, now we have to let this dry a little bit, unfortunately. So you can see I'm playing with what we call a low contrast. When you're working in very slow, close and knitted tones and colors, your contrast is lower. If you want to build that contrast up, you have to go to a blue or a green or something to get a harsher contrast. Then that changes the attitude of the painting. So it all depends on what you want. It doesn't matter what people want. It's what does the painter want. People are secondary.
I noticed when you covered up the drippings with your almost a white,
Yeah.
like you want the drippings to show through.
No, but if they do, I'm not going to fight. In other words, I'm not going to fight my canvas. If I was working for myself, you notice when I'm on the table, it's flat. I could control all that. But when I'm talking to you guys, I can't control it. I just have to work with it. So by fading it, I can shift it under. At least it moves under and goes up, rather than come out and disturb my action, which annoys me all the time. Now let's do something really nuts on this here. I mean, this is too obvious. Well, we'll do it down here because I don't have anything down there anyway. So let's play.
The other one's not so bad. Just the other one.
It's getting there. Now watch. Now, when I do that, there's a relationship between this and that, which isn't strong enough. If I want to kick that color up, I have to layer it in. If I pull that corner up and this corner, I can control the relationship of the grayish tone. Now watch what happens when I throw a white on it. In other words, if I want to knock that down because I want to keep the harmony, this is what happens. Still has the same tint, but it's a little lighter. And then I will pull up into areas where the white is. And then go after it again with the yellow. I'm gonna need a lot of soap. So the painting's starting to take on a different sensibility. As the painting gets stronger in color, it starts to pulse a lot. I let the painting tell me what to do at this point. Okay, now we got to get stronger with the orange. This could get really difficult. All right, now we'll see. Or maybe we won't. I'm pushing this a little bit, but then it's acrylic. Who the hell cares? I just want to show you, as it gets stronger to that color, how it reacts. And the evolution is pretty interesting, and I'm not using a whole lot of color. The next week we'll use a blue and green, and we'll play with that. Okay. There we go. There we go. Not bad. Come on, you piece of crap. There we are. Okay. Now we have an explosion of fall. Son of a gun. Unfortunately, we have to wait. And then we'll white it out. Okay, how's this thing doing? Well, it's almost dry now. Well, pretty close anyway. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to give this paint to somebody, I don't know, because I can't use it. Okay, now we're going to plane out an area to see what happens. Now this is making the surface of the painting a part of the painting. The white becomes a color that is an action within the idea of the piece and tends to help it quite a bit. Doesn't mean you're done, just means you got the beginning of an idea. I'll pull that painting forward at the top. Let it slide under here. Now it should get more exciting and more dimensional in its sensibility as we play with it a little bit, because the action of all the colors change position, theoretically. Now, if you go too far, which is what I'm going to do, you can always bring it back where you need it. This is going to get tricky because now you're going to go to pure color. Okay, painting has a new statement. Isn't that interesting? That's more fun than sucking eggs. Okay, here we go. Now, if I pull this orange back up, I create its position and shift and move it as I work across the plane. Not too bad, actually. Pull it down. Let the white play with it. Oh, I don't watch it. I'm going to start liking this damn thing, and then I'm in trouble. Let it stay behind the white in this area of the painting. Shift it on top as it comes down. Changing its position. So I'm interacting with the white, and the white now has become a dominant color. In other words, you can use white as a color depending on what you do with it. So now it's confusing. That means I got a good paint. So here we go. Shift that over the edge, plane here. I'll be damned. If I keep this up, I'll actually know what I'm doing. You know? Very nice. Now, the white is transparent, so some of that's going to come up and interact, and that's what you want. You don't want it to be so opaque that everything is completely covered, because you want the interaction of those planes very quiet and very soft. As the eye sees the painting, it starts to see more, and then it figures somebody's in there painting it. And kind of scary. And you have to watch out the position of the paint as you're working it. Oh, I'll be damned. And this is a very simple palette, not complex, easy to use. Anybody can play with it. And before you know it, you got a painting. We'll see what happens. Okay, now I'm going to change the position of the yellow in this corner. Here, 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 here. Shows you how little you need in order to get the painting to have some interest and some light, hopefully. Set up, you have the back of the paper. You're doing nothing. I got a watercolor on the back of one of these. Okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. There's the painting. Pretty simple. So anybody got any more questions? Everybody staring?
Which part do you feel you want to take out now?
I don't know yet. When you stand in front of your painting, your brain takes over and your eye takes over. You start shifting and moving. You have to trust your memory, the amount of painting you've done, and what the action of the painting is you want. And that's, you don't do anything unless that fuses. If it doesn't, that means you don't touch it. Sign it. You don't force anything to be anything else than what you started it to be. That keeps your paintings clean. If all of a sudden the painting is feeding you with information, you start another painting. That's its purpose. The painters, a lot of painters don't realize, as they paint, their subconscious feeding the idea of the piece. And as it works, you start seeing things that you want to elaborate on. They tend to do it on the same surface, and that kills the painting. Keep a blank thing, sketch it on you real quick. Stop. Don't be in such a hurry. Let the painting feed you. It's like food. For a painter, position, structure, tension, shift of volume is a language. It's not just a pictorial element, it is a language that feeds you and feeds your eye. Because you're no longer using a vocabulary, you're using a visual response. And that response will annoy you or want you to do something or to do something else. And that something else is usually a new canvas then. Now, I go around you guys all the time and try to take your brushes away. Anything else? The one medium that you can use with just about anything is watercolor. Like last year, I did a egg yolk in watercolor, and then I could put acrylic right on top. I could put oil right on top. Because watercolor is just pigment and a little bit of mix, but basically it's pigment. It'll work right into the oil paint. Oil painters have been using watercolor to correct things in your paintings and to start their paintings for centuries. This is what I do in oil. I often lay in, I'll take an ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, cobalt violet, and I'll mix it. I'll use that as a base color and make planes and shifts and movements. I put it up and I let it dry. Then I come in, I take my white, whip it up, plain in on top. I pull that dark around, I let that dry. Then I put a light color on top. White is the secret to oil painting. Yeah. In other words, when you got, well, a lot of you guys, when you change your color, like you put a green on top of an orange, you just throw the green on top of the orange, and then pretty soon the green dies. You know, it just doesn't have enough juice. But if you run a white through there, let it dry, and then run your green on top, you have a beautiful green, and you can control it. You can make a light green, a deep green, you can make anything you want. You can make a black if you want.
Then question about black. How can I make different shadow black?
Oh, easy. I make my own blacks all the time.
But different shadow.
Burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, black.
Okay.
Green, red, and blue, ultramarine blue or cobalt blue makes a Payne's gray, which is almost like a deep black. But it has either a blue tone or green tone, depending. Then you can take your colors, mix them together. Your greens and your reds, mix them together, whip them, they'll get a tone, you'll get a tone of black. The only black I actually buy is vine black because it's warm.
So we like to have like right corner, more a strong black.
Yeah. You want, it's the opacity. It's the opacity because if black will sink, right, against a warm color. So you gotta make it opaque and strong, good edge, and you shift that up and use it as your anchor. You gotta be real careful with black because black eats color. But I'm a big believer, if you don't know, I tend to know what my color is gonna do by now, after 50 years. You know? But if I'm working with a color I don't know, I start with the palette, always. Because I wanna know, like I'll say I'm using this color, I'll lay a plane of that color down, and then if I wanna work a gray or a green next to it, I'll mix it around it and place it to see on the palette what it's gonna do. If it's doing it there, it's gonna do it up here. So that gives me more control. When you're working with color, most of you guys know, it doesn't take much to lose the color. And all of a sudden, your idea of your painting starts to dissolve. Because the action of the painting ceases to exist. Because you didn't pay enough attention to what you were putting next to it. You just put it up there because it entered your head. It's got to enter your eye. You can see this thing is starting to fade into something. The yellow is becoming a background color. The orange is coming up, see? So you're seeing the position of the colors change as we play and look at it.
How you create the luminosity? How you create the luminosity?
Luminosity is created always the same way. It's a color over a color. You have a certain set of colors that are transparent. The transparent colors will always go over the opaque color. So say I may do that next month. Say I run a red in here and I let it dry. Then I throw an orange on top of that. I let that dry. Then I take a alizarin red and I hand rub it on top. I get a luminosity. Because it's the interaction of the lighter tone to the deeper, cooler tone that creates the light.
It would be nice to know how to use that.
Yeah, and you got to be careful. A lot of people do it too fast and they're mixing the color. Once it's mixed, the luminosity is gone.
And not use a white over
Sure,
for a luminosity, no?
sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. If the white is right, you can take a white for this form. I can texture the hell out of that and let it dry. Then I can take a rag and take a soft yellow, put over that, and I get a luminosity. Or I can take a red, put over that, wipe it down, get a luminosity.
Is it Gorky did that? Also, like Gorky did the same?
Gorky did that, you
The
bet.
luminosity?
Sure. And also you have to remember that in color, which is where most of us come from, the optics of the two colors have a lot to do with our painting. So we're always looking at this color against that color. And that optics creates this. So pretty soon you get this. So like if I run a yellow-green or a light blue, very strong light blue next to that, you get a vibration. But I have to have a white there or it's not going to stay clean. It's going to turn into a brownish tone.
That's basically what you did across the bottom.
You saw what happened. That's why I did it, so you can see. In other words, this already has a relation up here. So I'm not fussed too much. And if I drop this yellow down over that as it dries, it'll push it under, you're okay. And I can run another white on top of that when it's dry. Well, it's simple. You take a, say if I take and make an orange plane on a white surface. Now, I run my planes here and I let them dry. You have to be completely dry. Then I hand rub an alizarin transparent over that. The whole thing will be a transparent action of those colors. It's that simple. And then all I have to do is pull the white up in one area, let it slide behind in the other, and I got a painting. So it just depends. Now you can try that with different blues. Ultramarine blue is transparent. So say you start with a cerulean blue, you plane it down, you let it dry, glaze an ultramarine blue on top. See what it does. Keep a rag handy, wipe it so some of it jumps up if it's too heavy. And you'll get a translucency. It won't be black, it'll be blue. Blue on blue. You know, you have to play with your colors to see what they will give you. Once you do it, it doesn't leave your head. You're painters. It gets in your memory and that's it. If you look at most of my sketchbooks, it's full of notes and I'm writing out concepts that I've discovered or watching as I'm out in nature or looking at the sun as it hits a leaf. And I'll be sitting there seeing this deep leaf and all of a sudden I'll see a gold sheen along the edge. I say, where the hell is that coming from? So I'll write a note. Because those transitions of tones and color become a part of the language that makes my painting. Without them, my painting has no value. It's just a bunch of color.
And so the tubes you buy, they will say opaque, transparent for oil? Or you
Well,
have to know that?
most oil's already transparent. So if you read, it'll tell you this is transparent. It's sometimes a little tiny. Yeah. And there's not many transparent colors. There's more opaque than there is transparent. So you kind of separate them.
So is it the same for watercolor as for
Almost all watercolor is more transparent anyway, so it really doesn't matter. Like if I run a red down with enough water, it's pink. So watercolor is weak in its sensibility. If you want a really strong red in watercolor, you have to really squeeze that water out and just plane in the red so it sits on top. Otherwise, you're going to get pink. Try it. Take a red, run it across your paper and see what happens. Now, pigments have gotten a little different because the commercial world is making different pigments when you buy something. You don't know what you're getting half the time. And you look at a red, it could be red anything, it could be red oxide. So you have to be careful. You say, if it says cadmium red, it's cadmium red. If it says cadmium red via something, it's not. That doesn't mean it's a bad color, it's just you have to know what it's going to do. When I buy watercolors, I take the pigments and I run them on a wet piece of paper to see what they're going to do before I start painting.